All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Fantasy Sports Today here on SportsGrid. It is Sunday morning. It is Super Bowl Sunday, and we have a super-sized edition of the show. Craig Mish, Joe Pisapia, George Kurtz, and Matt Striker. We got you for the next 3 hours, getting you ready for the upcoming Super Bowl. It is coverage all day long, beginning live right now. So, without further ado, let's take a look at the foursome that we have for this show today. I mean, this is a rare feat that we're accomplishing here at SportsGrid, having all of us together at once. Gentlemen, it is great to see you and you and you and you here on the show today. Yeah, there it is. And yeah, I mean, look, Striker's got, okay, we got Joe Pisapia. Yes, I see George, of course, staring. Well, finally, we got George to look somewhere else. Okay, that worked, yeah. Our whole show plan before the show didn't work because George just was like this the entire beginning of the show. But other than that, it's great. It's great to be with you guys. I'll go below me to start because normally I just toss it to George and he talks for a bit, gets angry, and then goes back to me. Joe Pisapia. Joe Pisapia, good morning to you. A nice little reunion for us. How are you?
Yes, it is indeed. I mean, I can play my best George Kurtz and just rant and rave and throw some things if you prefer, if that's your style this early in the morning. But if it's not, we can pivot to a little bit of Super Bowl talk for the next 3 hours. We have a rematch of the game we had a couple of years ago. Some people hate this. The people in Philadelphia don't. And I can tell you that the Kansas City Chiefs fans don't hate it either. But regardless, certainly I think we ended up with the two best teams, and it's hard to argue against that at this point. Fun fact, too, one-score games, the Chiefs are 12-0 this year in one-score games. So if the books are saying this is a one-score game, maybe we should be looking to KC. Just saying.
Yeah, and George, good morning to you, George. Great to be back with you once again. Again, the four of us throughout the show here. I call it basically the four hosts that SportsGrid left behind for the Super Bowl. That's basically who we are here, essentially. George, I know that you've been burning the midnight oil here, working a lot of shows, and George's parlay bets are about to come in here. You got a few hours before you make yours, and of course, we'll go over some possibilities on the show here today. But, George, it is basically, the last football day for us of the season. I hope we get to enjoy a great game.
Yeah, I think it's the most important thing, right? That's a competitive game. It's close. That it's not, let's just see what the halftime show is in the commercials because the game is terrible. And, growing up for a while, all the Super Bowls seem to be blowouts, right? But the last 10 years or so, they have been close games. The last time these two teams played, it was a field goal game. One thing that concerns me, guys, is I'm all over the Eagles, man. And I did in-game live last night. We had about a half dozen guests. Everybody's on the Eagles. I feel a lot better about some of my bets if some people would take Kansas City.
Yeah, and maybe a new hotel will be built off SportsGrid's picks with the Eagles today. We will see. Matt Striker, meanwhile, is with us in the house here. We're going to get some words of wisdom. You're probably going to learn something here on the show today before it's all said and done. A very busy schedule always for Striker. And, normally with a host, I would say, what is your big Super Bowl party? What are your picks? What are your parlays? But Matt Striker's chasing kids around for 3 hours before the game, putting them down for a nap just so he could even get to watch the game later. I hope that's on your menu at the very least.
Yes, and I appreciate that. Overall, I got to be honest with you, I'm super excited. Actually, my son is old enough now. He calls it the Super Bowl, but they were talking about it in pre-K. So we're going to lay eyes on it. Hopefully he'll stay awake. Hopefully not for the whole entire thing. But I'm excited for everything, honestly. I'm excited for all the social media talk. The Chiefs get the benefit of the whistle, all the controversy surrounding Travis Kelce, the polarity of the luminaries that are going to be in attendance. All that stuff is really fun. And just a quick one out there, I'm thinking knock wood. The death stare of Saquon Barkley is the difference. Amidst all the noise, I don't think he's come this far to watch the other team celebrate. I think it's a Barkley anytime touchdown, maybe add a Kelce anytime touchdown, and that's where I'm leaning, Craig.
Yeah, we finally, late in the week, over the last 48 hours, got a line movement. I feel like we did the same point spread for about 10 straight days. Now, all of a sudden, on the FanDuel Sportsbook, the line finally shifted where the Chiefs went from 1.5-point favorites to 1. Joe, I certainly think that there's a chance that by the time the game kicks off, it could be a pick 'em. I thought it'd go the other way. I thought the Chiefs would be -2. Andy Reid, of course, one of the best coaches of all time. Let's focus on him for a minute. He's tied with Don Shula for the second most Super Bowls ever. Patrick Mahomes, this is his 5th Super Bowl. He ties John Elway at the second most for quarterbacks. But as we know, John Elway's Super Bowls did not go the way that Patrick Mahomes has had.
Well, not all of them, unfortunately. Some did towards the end. He stuck in the game long enough. But yeah, it's not surprising because I think what happens is people are looking at this Eagles team and they're seeing a team that is incredibly talented, young. You got a lot of these kids coming from the Georgia ranks, right, who knew how to win, played in a lot of championship games, won those championship games. And I think that does matter. It's a little bit more of a winning culture there. And some of these kids who don't know any better and weren't there the last time this team went to and lost a Super Bowl. However, you mentioned Andy Reid here and what they're going after and what the Chiefs are chasing here, which is history. And Andy Reid has a bit of history too, because that guy, when you give him extra time to prepare, is about as good as it gets in the league. How often do we say, sitting here on a Sunday, well, Andy Reid off a bye, lock it up, right? Well, how is this really any different? More time to prepare against a team that he's already familiar with and has kind of gone through preparations. Now, Saquon's different. It's a huge different part of this game that didn't exist before. I'm fascinated to see what George has to say about it. Also, George mentioned halftime. George, if you can name a Kendrick Lamar song or perhaps a Kendrick Lamar lyric, maybe we'll give you the rest of the next 3 hours off. I'm willing to make that bet, Craig.
Yeah, George, he's going to fail that one there. Not even worth bringing up. George, we on the show that we've done, we've talked so much about Barkley all season, and Joe brings up a really good point. Matt mentioned the anytime touchdown. To me, anybody who's betting today seems like they have an anytime touchdown on Barkley or Jalen Hurts. I found it fascinating, George, during the week that Barkley's number was a little bit better than Hurts as far as the minus money was concerned. I was a little surprised with that. I kind of felt like it should be backwards considering they get the ball near the goal line. I feel like for Barkley to score, if the ball is near the goal line, it's going to require Philadelphia to not score on the first time out because that tush push is coming.
That tush push is absolutely coming. I'm big on the Hurts scoring today. I took that bet almost immediately once the props lines came out. It was minus 115, went down to minus 110, thought I was going to eat it a little bit, and I look now it's minus 120. So once again, I'm not the only person who believes that. I think Barkley scores too, guys. I do. The problem is the price was minus 190 at the start. Well, minus 185, and that's all of a sudden up a nickel as well at minus 195 here. I do think there's a pretty good chance they both get in the end zone today. One thing I like with the Barkley touchdown, by the way, I think the Philadelphia Eagles are going to win. I'll parlay it. Barkley anytime touchdown and the Philadelphia Eagles to win the game. Now I got a nice plus 155 here, so I'll take that. By the way, on my book, New York, Eagles still plus 1.5.
Yeah, a lot of books are different. The interesting thing, Matt, is that some of these books, I hate to say it, they can geotag where you are, and if you live in the, I hate to do that, but if you live in the Northeast, you're definitely not getting any bonus money taking the Philadelphia Eagles because they think that you're probably going to go that direction. I hate to say it, but that's kind of the case. Let's go to the Chiefs here, Matt, for a minute. I mean, you've certainly been around athletics and professionally and watched football for a long time. Last 24 hours, we got the news that Travis Kelce uncommitted on playing beyond this season. I thought that we were going to go into the Super Bowl with Andy Reid uncommitted and Kelce saying that he's coming back, but it appears that we got the reverse. I mean, I suppose it's a little silly. It does feel like Kelce has more football in him, but I felt like that was an easy storyline that came out yesterday.
Yeah, just because I think you need fodder so close to the end, but to try to tie that to any kind of line movement, I think would be a hard stretch. And I have to console the crestfallen to that geotag thing because now all of us are saying, hey, now hang on a second. Aren't we all entitled to the same odds independent of where we are? The books should be that way, but we'll talk more about that on the other side, amongst other things.
Yeah, it's a real thing. Now, I don't think they're going to like me saying that, but it is a real thing. All right, coming up next, is there a possibility that any of the X factors in the Super Bowl end up winning the MVP? I got to tell you, there is one name that I have interest in. It doesn't happen that often in the Super Bowl outside usually of a quarterback. But could it be an X factor player taking home the trophy? We'll tell you next.
It's finally here. The big game is just days away, And SportsGrid is live from New Orleans all week long, bringing you the latest news, insights, and analysis from the biggest names in the game. And on game day, we've got you covered all day long with expert picks, live odds, and everything you need to make the most out of the biggest game of the year. Don't miss a second, and it's all happening only on SportsGrid.
Best dressed guy, let me tell you, next to me in terms of Radio Row. I want to get your thoughts quickly on the game, Philly and KC. How do you see it playing out?
You know, obviously you got Patrick Mahomes, who just finds a way to win. Then you got on the other side of the table an alien and, Barkley. I mean, he's had an incredible year.
Right.
I think whoever has the balls last is going to win the football game.
Only on SportsGrid.
Two guys that can do it all.
Too much electricity this morning.
This is a good time. We're having a lot of fun.
I had to do a triple take. Ka-ching! Why? Because of parity.
I didn't mean to offend.
Yeah, it's not going to happen.
Load management is a dirty word.
Let him rip.
You know what? Circumstances provide the results. What?
How do you do this once?
Oh, Donnie, you got such a good show there.
A network that is booming.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
Welcome back to our super-sized fantasy sports today here on Sports Grid, as we got you covered until 11 a.m. Eastern, and then it is wall-to-wall coverage leading you up until the Super Bowl later today. Craig Mish, Joe Pisapia, it is George Kurtz, Matt Striker, the four of us, normally Saturdays and Sundays, as we get ready to pivot off to fantasy baseball season starting next week, but we got one more show in us, as they say, with some football. Gentlemen, it is going to be a great game. I think everybody would agree. The only question is can a lesser player become a bigger factor? That's not to say that the players that we're going to review don't have a big impact on their teams, but to win an MVP or something like that remains to be seen. So let's start off. And, Matt, I'll throw this one in your direction as we start with the kickers. We have certainly, very capable kickers on both sides, but Harrison Butker has been a player that has certainly no stranger to the Super Bowl. He's kicked some very big kicks for them. In fact, if he misses one or two, the Chiefs probably do not win either of the last two Super Bowls. But I guess I would throw it this way to ask you, do you think he plays a large factor in the game? The point spread would indicate yes, but it always doesn't necessarily indicate that this year is going to be like years past. What do you think?
Well, it's a great lead-in by you, and obviously you're astute. You see how the line reflects how tight this game's going to be, and you mentioned a half-point move to some places down to just one. George mentioning up in New York, though he's still seeing 1.5. But either way, that's where it comes down to these high-pressure moments. Now, I'm from a time where guys like Scott Norwood are really just seared into my mind, and I'm sure the older wagerers nodding their head or throwing their shoe, one or the other. But either way, when you take a look at the kickers and a high-profile kicker like Butker, sure, it can come down to a high-pressure situation. But being there, you mentioned, having the experience, that's going to make all the difference.
Yeah, it definitely could. And George, to go to some of the defensive players, you rarely see a defensive player win a Super Bowl MVP or have a significant impact in a game. I mean, we could talk about it. Is there pressures? But we've seen guys win it in that space. Larry Brown on the Dallas Cowboys, George, I'm sure that one comes to mind for you, where he had, interception. It's kind of a random Super Bowl MVP. And then, of course, if you did have a big game in the Super Bowl, George, back then, Al Davis would call you and sign you to a long-term contract the very next year. That's how the Raiders ended up making their, making their way through the league. Let's go through the two defensive players that could pressure the quarterback. We have Chris Jones on the defensive side for the Kansas City Chiefs, who could be a big factor depending on Jalen Hurts. But I got to tell you, this is my one big dart throw for potential MVP. Don't think it's going to happen, but Jalen Carter's basically been uncoverable for any offensive line. I mean, he generally is getting through almost every time. You remember the Eagles used to have Hassan Reddick on the outside. Their pass rush is okay, but Jalen Carter has been the one that's been doing the most damage, George.
Yeah, we're talking about this all week. I think there's a chance for a Philadelphia defensive player to win the award today, mainly because I don't think we can get a high-scoring game. If we do get a high-scoring game, then you know it's going to be probably Hurts or Barkley. And I think, by the way, the voters want it to be Barkley big time in this award, but Hurts obviously would have a shot there. But if Kansas City is shut down, I don't think the Kansas City offensive line is all that good. I think Jalen Carter is going to have a field day. All right, to get a sack overall, just one sack, not multiple sacks. One sack was plus 116 as of last night. I am on that coming into this game. I think Mahomes is going to get sacked multiple times, mainly because, and it's not all a bad thing. I don't think the Chiefs are going to be able to run the ball whatsoever. I think Mahomes is going to have to drop back 40 plus times. That's a lot of dropbacks, a lot of chance for Carter to get that sack. Other players to get sacks as well here. I think he will take some sacks. I think he's going to throw an interception as well. But I'm on Jalen Carter, Craig, the guy you mentioned here, definitely get a sack in this game.
Yeah, and look, he's basically been probably, if not, the best or second best draft pick. I mean, it's hard to go against Jaden Daniels and some of the other players that were taken ahead of him. But Joe has had such a big impact this season. Meanwhile, Quinyon Mitchell, another name that is out there for a potential pick or two. Cooper DeJean is another. Trent McDuffie's been fantastic for Kansas City. How do you see the defensive backs lining up as potential X factors here, Joe?
Well, just to piggyback, George's point too on Jalen Carter. I mean, he is a massive problem. Aaron Donald is saying he is the new me. And when Aaron Donald says words like that, I think everybody needs to stand up and pay attention to it. If you're still getting a sack Brock on him this morning at plus money, you better take it, because it would be absurd considering there is a bit of a patchwork offensive line issue going on here with the Chiefs. Tooney had to go out there and play a different position this year, and they've been just kind of piecing things together there. Now they've held it together. But Jalen Carter is going to put a lot of pressure up the middle of the field, and then the corners are something you have to worry about. You still have Slay, the veteran there, Quinyon Mitchell, and Cooper DeJean, two guys selected by the Philadelphia Eagles. Howie did a terrific job of solidifying the corners, because last season we know how bad the defensive backfield was for the Eagles. It was really just disappointing. They could not hold leads. They had all kinds of problems in these games. And that was good from a fantasy standpoint for us, because there's a lot of shootouts, but unfortunately not so good for the Philadelphia Eagles. So between Carter up front and then those corners out there too, who are going to be matched up against some, let's face it, pretty mid-level wide receiver talent at this stage in their careers. Worthy, a very explosive player, but he needs some time to separate. Will Jalen Carter allow Mahomes that time? Then the other guys like Hollywood Brown, DeAndre Hopkins, Juju, they don't create a lot of separation. One other note, too, about Butker and the kicking games here, the X factors. Butker, 36 for 40 on field goals, 67 for 70 in the playoffs, 21 playoff games. That's a lot of experience. Just want to point out here, too, Jake Elliott tied for the third most field goal misses this year. So it's not just Butker, but it's also the other side. If this game is as close as Vegas is telling us, then it really might come down to a missed extra point. And it seems like hyperbolic to be sitting here this morning talking about that, but it might just be that simple. And who do you feel better, more confident making those extra points, making those field goals, making those kicks in big spots? Right now, I think the Eagles side is a little shaky.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that point. I just think that based on the way, especially that Philadelphia has played, we saw it with the way Washington played. We've seen it the way Detroit played. I mean, Joe, I just don't think in this game that I understand that Philly's kicking is not as good as Kansas City. I don't think this is going to play a factor at all in this game. These teams are just so aggressive. Anytime it's 4th and 2 or 4th and 3 or 4th and 5, they're going for it, So maybe an extra point could be, a potential, game changer in this. And it's not that I don't think that Sirianni doesn't like Elliott, and I know Elliott's been brutal. You're totally right there. But anytime they are close and within a score, I just think they're going to go for it as opposed to kicking a field goal. So, I like all the props for all the field goals under in this one. I just don't think that those are going to be huge factors there. All right. Meanwhile, rare air for Patrick Mahomes if he wins this game among Super Bowl quarterbacks. We'll talk about that next.
even the great Nick Saban had to put his team together to do it his way. We know Coach Ryan's coming in to come run the offense, who was his right-hand man, a good friend of his at UW. And, now he's coming in. Everything is going the way we want this thing to be. Coach DeBoer is a great recruiter. He's a great father of players. He's a great leader of men. He's going to do great.
Only on SportsGrid.
But don't tell anybody. I'm sick of coming here every year and talking about the Kansas City Chiefs.
Look, remember a few years ago we were here, people saying, Andy Reid's going to retire. I'm like, no way. When you're riding Seabiscuit, Secretariat, when you're riding a horse that you know can win, who would jump off that?
Pharrell Coast to Coast. Only on SportsGrid.
My mom, she was a professional ballet dancer. My aunt played professional tennis. My dad played football at Pitt when they won a national championship. My sister ran track at Stanford. So it's just kind of in my blood to love all sports. And so I've always obviously loved golf, but it's been nice to kind of branch out a little bit more and get into different sports and different topics and not just always do golf.
Only on SportsGrid.
Well, if Patrick Mahomes pulls off another win in the Super Bowl, he's going to be in rarefied air, as they say, because this would be his fourth, which would tie Terry Bradshaw and Joe Montana for the second most of all time. As we bring you back here to Fantasy Sports today, and, George is probably right now, George Kurtz is sitting there thinking, my gosh, I hope Craig does not bring up what we talked about all season long about me thinking that Patrick Mahomes is not yet a Hall of Famer because the guys are going to crush me here on the show. Oops. Sorry, George. He's a Hall of Famer. It doesn't matter if he wins this game or not. But, George, if he does, let's put this to rest, please. 4 Super Bowls? Are you kidding me? Look at the other guys who have accomplished this. Brady, Montana, Bradshaw. Your guy, Troy Aikman, only got 3. Mahomes has already caught him. Please, get on board here.
So according to your theory, if he only played 4 seasons but won all 4 Super Bowls, he's a Hall of Famer. That's just what you said there.
Yes.
No, you have to play a certain amount of time. I said, you wanted to get me mad? How does Sterling Sharp make the Pro Bowl? He played 7 seasons, the Hall of Fame. He played 7 seasons.
He got hurt.
Terrell Davis should not be in. I'll go on and on about it. Mahomes is going to make the Hall of Fame. But I vote him in. I think it's 8 seasons now. I think you got to play 10. You got to play 10 before I'm going to vote you for the Hall of Fame. Just the way I'm at. I think longevity matters. I think that's important before you make the Hall of Fame. I hate the Hall of Fame in all sports, by the way. It's not just football. It's baseball, hockey. It's not the Hall of Fame anymore. It's the Hall of. It has nothing to do with Mahomes. We more going on a tangent and rage here. It's the Hall of Very Good. It's what we've done nowadays. I mean, you look at who the NFL voted earlier this week. Really, Eric Allen. He was very good. Hall of Fame? I mean, come on. I mean, no. The Hall of Fame just annoys me to no end here. Not the Mahomes part. I have no problem with anybody who puts Mahomes in now, by the way. I don't. It's the point. It's more of a point I like to make that longevity, that's important in professional sports to make the Hall of Fame. And we've thrown that out the window, and more specifically in football than any other sport. I understand football's brutal. People get hurt early. Their careers can end. And I do understand that to a degree. But I just think we've watered down the Hall of Fame in all sports so badly that I've just lost complete interest in it.
Yeah, well, I mean,
can I poke this bear, Craig?
Yeah, go ahead. Go right ahead. I was going to set you up.
I want to poke this bear. I want to poke this bear. Is Kurt Warner a Hall of Famer? I'm just out of curiosity, George.
No, I wouldn't vote him in. I wouldn't. Eli Manning? Okay. No way in hell is he a Hall of Famer. I mean, But yeah, every these guys played it. I mean, that's just no.
Okay.
Listen,
Well, the reason I ask is
would
because
take
Kurt Warner is.
put him in. I would take a lot of
Well,
guys.
because Mahomes is already ahead of Kurt Warner. All-time passing yards. He's already ahead of him on that.
I don't think
certainly if Super Bowl wins.
Eli Manning has more yards than almost every quarterback there is, and he's just not a Hall of Famer. He's not.
Okay.
Hold on. And Matt, is the Ultimate Warrior a Hall of Famer? I mean, it was short. It was very compact. I mean, I don't know. I still put him in.
So we can all poke fun to this, but I think everyone has a point. George, to your point about longevity and the time in which that term Hall of Fame was ingrained in our mind as kids, that has changed. Society has changed, and we understand, and you had mentioned it, there's a brutality to the game, but I understand what George is saying about longevity. I also understand what Joe is saying, though, about in the time frame and the body of work and the albums that the band produced, how many hits are there? Because for a generation, that is Hall of Fame worthy. So there's a struggle to the definition beyond anything else. But as far as the Ultimate Warrior goes, and as far as fame, to people out there, he changed their lives. In his body of work, there is a Hall of Fame, but it's much different. It's pro wrestling. It's theater, not real like this. Right, Craig?
Yeah, sure. Most Super Bowl wins as a coach. I mean, they're all Hall of Famers, George. Sorry. Bill Belichick, Don Shula, Andy Reid, Tom Landry, Chuck Noll.
10 years.
They didn't even step on a field and play, George. Chill. Belichick, Shula, Reid, Landry, and Noll, all with those Super Bowls. George, Andy Reid could pick up, is this his fourth? Is that right? His fourth Super Bowl. And that's another debate and conversation to have. I mean, I still personally do have Don Shula number one all time, and then Bill Belichick. And then I guess you could say, is it true? Is Andy Reid 3? I mean, Bill Walsh. I mean, there's a lot of other good choices, even though they don't have the Super Bowl numbers.
A lot of respect for Andy Reid. I forget whether it was Joe or Matt brought it up earlier. His numbers with that extra week of rest are just incredible here. It is probably, like I said, you don't make a lot of money betting against Mahomes and betting against Andy Reid, yet that's what I'm trying to do today for the second straight time with the Eagles and the Chiefs in the Super Bowl.
Yeah, well, we certainly turned this into a little bit of a debate show, but we'll continue to talk about the upcoming game and some potential keys to the game when we return next here on Fantasy Sports Today on SportsGrid. We'll be right back.
Even the great Nick Saban had to put his team together to do it his way. We know Coach Ryan's coming in to come run the offense, who was his right-hand man, a good friend of his at UW. And, now he's coming in. Everything is going the way we want this thing to be. Coach DeBoer is a great recruiter. He's a great father of players. He's a great leader of men. He's going to do great.
Only on SportsGrid.
But don't tell anybody. I'm sick of coming here every year and talking about the Kansas City Chiefs.
Look, remember a few years ago we were here, people saying, Andy Reid's going to retire. I'm like, no way. When you're riding Seabiscuit, Secretariat, when you're riding a horse that you know can win, who would jump off that?
Pharrell Coast to Coast. Only on SportsGrid.
My mom, she was a professional ballet dancer. My aunt played professional tennis. My dad played football at Pitt when they won a national championship. My sister ran track at Stanford. So it's just kind of in my blood to love all sports. And so I've always obviously loved golf, but it's been nice to kind of branch out a little bit more and get into different sports and different topics and not just always do golf.
Only on SportsGrid.
All right, welcome back to Fantasy Sports today here on SportsGrid. Good Sunday morning. Thanks for waking up with us. We're here till 11 a.m. Eastern, just going through all of the props, all the storylines for the big game. And, of course, we got you covered for In-Game Live coming up later today. But, gentlemen, let's get started with some of the other big storylines in this game. And I'll go back to you, Joe, on this one. All right, so, look, Steve Spagnuolo, once upon a time, was a head coach in the NFL. People are wondering, like, why is this guy not a head coach again? He's been so good. And if you think about the way that game against the Bills went down, which feels like a month ago already, he had some really big play calls at the end of that game that forced Josh Allen into a situation that basically said, if we can stop this guy on one play at the end of the game, we win. That's what he did. Joe, does this come down to one play at the end of the game stopping Patrick Mahomes? Because every piece of data shows us, and the point spread, that this is coming down to the end. It's coming down to a last possession. So if the Chiefs have the ball and they have Spags and Jalen Hurts has it and he's got to make one play, do you benefit Hurts or do you benefit Spags in the spot?
I benefit Spags, and it's an easy reason why. It's because I've seen it my entire life as a Patriots fan. He tagged me with two of the worst losses I've ever seen. One heartbreaking, one I saw coming a mile away. And it's the same way by bringing pressure, especially on third downs and those third and longs. Now, the Eagles do a pretty good job of avoiding those situations. But if they find themselves in those situations, just like the Bills did last week, what does Spags do? He ramps up those blitzes. He'll give you the corner blitz. He'll give you all this stuff. How the Bills did not know they were bringing a corner blitz, I don't know, because he did the same thing last year in a big spot against Purdy in the Super Bowl. And I remember it, and I'm thinking to myself, all right, well, you're going to see that corner blitz there. There it is. And Josh Allen and the rest of the Buffalo Bills seemed really perplexed by it. But for all the talk about, how great Andy Reid is, and he is, Steve Spagnuolo is probably the unheralded star here of this coaching staff that people don't really give enough credit for how important his role has been. Talk about greatness too. Let's also go back to some of these other performances this Chiefs defense has had against some great running backs. How about the 2019 AFC Championship game against the Titans and Derrick Henry, who was having an all-world season that year, held him to 69 yards on 19 carries. What about Christian McCaffrey, the rushing champion last year, held him to 80 yards on 20 carries. So if you think the Spags defense has no shot to slow down Saquon Barkley, you're wrong. What they've got to avoid is the big Saquon Barkley play. That is the backbreaker in these kind of games, but I think Spags is going to be prepared for it.
All right, now another X-Factor type player, but is a main player in the game, Matt, is Saquon Barkley. But do you necessarily have to correlate a Barkley big game with an Eagles win? Because what's really fascinating, Matt, is we don't know what an Eagles win looks like without Barkley having a huge game, because it's just every game after every game. It's like if you close your eyes and dream and think, when was the last time the Eagles won and Barkley was quiet? I'm sure it's happened this season, but we certainly don't remember it. Maybe it was November. I don't know. It feels like forever ago. Matt, can Barkley have like 60, 70 yards in this game, go under his rushing prop, and the Eagles win?
Well, to Joe's point, it's about the run, the big run, when it happens, what happens. Because if everything the numbers are telling us that it's going to be close, it's going to be one of these tight situations. Think about the names of the players in whom you want the ball to be in their hands, right? So thinking about that is one thing. But you mentioned remove Barkley from the equation. Okay, so let's do that. As a wager, is there a game script that is a Goddard, Brown, Hurts heavy game script that results in a win? In my gut, I say no. But I don't need Barkley to have a gigantic day, and Joe's really astute here. I just need Barkley to do something. And I said it at the top, and then I wonder what George will have to say about it too, is that there's that death stare for Barkley. Amidst all the fanfare, all the peacocking, the Super Bowl, whatever, he's staring. I feel like he's just staring at a wall, just waiting for the whistle, Craig.
George, Barkley was not there. This is the big, X factor, so to speak, the last time these two teams played in the Super Bowl, and the game was close. So it would lead me to believe that if Barkley had, and I'm just going to throw a number out there. Now, again, his prop is about 109.5, 110, I think, on FanDuel. But let's just say, George, he had 80 yards, which, by the way, is a good number for the Super Bowl. That would lead me to believe, based on the time they played the last time, with the better defensive coordinator, clearly, in Vic Fangio, that there's a pretty good shot that the Eagles could even win with a meager game by Barkley.
Oh, I agree. I think there is. I think game script is going to tell you there's a good chance. I don't want to say the Eagles, the Chiefs are going to sell out to stop Barkley, but they're not playing a lot of cover two. right? Those safeties are going to crawl towards the line of scrimmage here to keep Barkley in check. It's sort of what do you want to die by? Do you want to die by Barkley, which is more than a knife, or do you want to die by the gun? The big plays to A.J. Brown here. But I think that's what they're going to do, keep Barkley in check and force Hurts to make those plays. If he starts to make those plays, okay. We'll play it more even here. We'll back those safeties up. I don't think it's going to be a big A.J. Brown game. I think God, it's going to have a big year. I know the public is on that. Everybody is, what scares me a little bit. I like Devonta Smith as well. I think we're sort of forgetting about him in those intermediate routes here. If Brown's going deep, you got it. You worry about Barkley. Devonta Smith, a lot of one-on-one there. So I kind of like his day today too. Bottom line is this: the Eagles have a lot of choices on offense. Even if Barkley is not, and he said 80 yards is a good game. You do that math, that's 1,300 yards a season. That's a really good game here. I think they're going to need to keep him more to 60 yards to really have a better shot in this game. If he only gets 60 yards, I can see this game going Kansas City's way, assuming they win with turnover battle there, or don't turn the ball over once or 0 times here. But I think Barkley is going to be kept in check somewhat. That being said, we've seen his longest run prop go from 25.5 to start the betting. It's down to 23.5 right now. I haven't taken that yet. I've got 33 prop bets. It's not one of them right now. I still have to think he makes that. It's the last football game of the season, man. I'm having fun. I'm having. Listen, we talked to Cam Stewart last night. What number do you think he's at between bets that involve the Super Bowl? It makes 33 look awfully small. He said he's at 102.
Wow.
So Cam is gone. It's the last game, man. I'm going to have some fun. No football.
They're all $2 bets, right?
Yeah, they're not. Oh, listen, there's a couple of $5 bets in there, of course. Why not have some joy? There's some novelty bets. Taylor Smith, is she going to hug somebody during the game? Why not? Let's see if she does it. How many times will they show her on camera? We got some fun bets.
Where can you bet those, by the way?
Seriously. You may have to look really. They're not on FanDuel, I'll tell you that.
No, they're not legal either, George. Anyway. All right, so Chiefs wide receivers, Joe, they finally got a player this offseason after losing Tyreek Hill that appears to be somewhat of a game changer. And I know they've shuttled through these receivers with Hopkins and Juju Smith-Schuster and Rashee Rice. They've tried a number of different receivers over the last couple of years to replace him. I'm not even sure that Worthy does replace Tyreek Hill, by the way. I don't think that that's fair. But the Philadelphia Eagles clearly have a really good defensive backfield. There are some that feel, though, that Worthy can beat those guys, and he is a big plan, a big factor in the game today. Kelsey sort of determines that, and we'll get to that coming up next. But can the Chiefs wide receivers beat these guys on the outside of the Eagles?
I think Worthy can. I don't think the others. And I think you're going to see a lot of Travis Kelce in this game because the one place you can attack the Philadelphia Eagles is still in that linebacking core. And Kobe Dean's injury was a big one. So I think what you're looking for here is one more ride into the sunset here for Travis Kelce. And Xavier Worthy, the thing about him is, too, they're getting the ball in his hands in different ways. You'll see him on the jet sweeps. You'll see him, on some gimmick plays all over the place. But Worthy's that one guy who can take the top off the defense. He can beat anybody. He is really fast. It's really hard to keep him in check. So if you're looking also, he is basically filling that Rashee Rice version, too, of what that role of the wide receiver was last year. Week 16, 65 yards. Week 17, 79 against Buffalo, 85. So really, it's been the coming out party these last couple of weeks where things have finally clicked for Worthy and Mahomes.
All right, so real quick, let's go around the building here. I don't want to say the other name because that's another show. Around the square here. Let's do that. Matt, I'll start with you. 10 seconds. If the Chiefs win, does Travis Kelce retire? That's been the story in the last 24 hours.
Sure, yeah, and he proposes in the middle of the field. Yes, why not?
No proposals.
Who's next? Go ahead, Joe.
Well, I'm the real Swiftie here, so I'm going to say yes, he retires if they win. No proposal. Yeah, he's done. Why would you keep taking hits when you can hang out and do a podcast with your brother?
George?
I do know a couple of Taylor Swift songs, by the way, so there's that. No, I don't think he's retiring. I think he's still got football left here. Why would you want to leave it on the field? I'll say no.
Yeah, I can't see any scenario where this is it for him. Not it for us either. We'll be right back.
It's finally here. The big game is just days away, and SportsGrid is live from New Orleans all week long, bringing you the latest news, insights, and analysis from the biggest names in the game. And on game day, we've got you covered all day long with expert picks, live odds, and everything you need to make the most out of the biggest game of the year. Don't miss a second, and it's all happening only on SportsGrid.
Even the great Nick Saban had to put his team together to do it his way. We know Coach Ryan's coming in to come run the offense, who was his right-hand man, a good friend of his at UW. And, now he's coming in. Everything is going the way we want this thing to be. Coach DeBoer is a great recruiter. He's a great father of players. He's a great leader of men. He's going to do great.
Only on SportsGrid.
It was the greatest show ever. It's funny, and you know what I like? You have balls. I mean, the stuff you do on that show, you are half crazy.
I feel like a good sense of humor, and I like to show it off. And this kind of originally started where people were the hot dog eating challenge was something that I always wanted to do, and every 4th of July, and I was like, I could eat a ton of hot dogs.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
Welcome back to Fantasy Sports Today here on SportsGrid. 1 year ago, believe it or not, I mean, it's crazy to think, Nick Sirianni and the Philadelphia Eagles were in some trouble. There was talk that Sirianni may lose his job. This is true. Jalen Hurts, what happened to him? Was hurt. They lost a bunch of games at the end of the season. And even during the regular season, even this year, Jalen Hurts didn't look like the same guy that he was a couple of years ago. But boy, George, has that changed. Jalen Hurts in the playoffs, 1,592 passing yards, 8 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, and 9 rushing touchdowns. Maybe the secret sauce, George, was the Eagles learning from that long losing streak that they had last year, the injuries that piled up on Jalen Hurts last year, and just keeping him healthy, NBA style, so to speak, with this DNP coach's decision, because it did seem like they didn't really have Hurts do a ton at the end of the regular season, and they saved him for the playoffs. Maybe I'm crazy. Sure, looks that way based on the way he's looked the last few weeks.
He's looked really good. It's hard to take anything away from Hurts. He did have the concussion at the end of the season, so he didn't play. Maybe that's a good thing. Get him fully rested there. He's a dual threat. He can throw the football. He's got massive weapons. A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith, Dallas Goedert. It certainly doesn't hurt that it's 2nd and 3. It seems like every time, because Barkley's gotten you 5-6 yards on first down, so they put you in good situations. Defenses kept guessing it. Those safeties have to back off here. Play action is wide open, right, because you're sucking everybody in. Oh, God, here we go. He's throwing over the top here. And you think about it, A.J. Brown hasn't even had that great a year. All right, because they haven't needed him always. Sometimes it is Devonta Smith. Sometimes it is Goddard. It's nobody else there. It certainly hasn't been Johan Johnson all season long here. So it's hard to criticize Hurts. But you're right. I mean, Sirianni had his issues this year, right? He's fighting with Zach Ertz of the Commanders here. He got in a fight with the fans. I mean, the guy is he's hard to root for in Sirianni. Hurts, listen, I'm a Cowboys fan. My money is on the Eagles, but man, it's hard to root for the Eagles. And Kevin Walsh and Fly Eagles Fly, and I can't take it anymore. With that being said, they are a great team. Also, that offensive line, top notch. It's a little easier when you got 4 seconds to throw the football.
Yeah, it definitely is. Matt Barkley, by the way, 442 rushing yards in the playoffs. I think Barkley, Matt, his signature moment definitely came against Washington, immediately running for that 60, 70-yard touchdown. I don't remember exactly how long it was. 6.7 yards per carry, 35 receiving yards, and 5 touchdowns for Saquon Barkley. And Matt, isn't it sort of funny when we go to Philadelphia here, we sort of focusing in on them, how different things are than they were a year ago? I mean, they had one of the bigger collapses in an NFL season with that kind of talent, I mean, Howie Roseman, the Eagles, they could have just stood pat and said, it was an anomaly. Teams don't usually lose that many at the end of the year. They didn't do that. They brought Barkley in, and it definitely seems like and I also want to make sure I keep mentioning Vic Fangio because I think he made a big difference too.
It's the world in which we live, right? It's recency bias. It's everyone's looking for the next hot stock, the next hot coin, the next hot currency reevaluation. And you mentioned all of the negative chatter. Yet you don't think there's going to be negative chatter the day after tomorrow, independent of who wins the game? It's just the way of the world. People need news, but it's not nourishment. As investors, as wagerers, we want to look at the numbers, right? 6.7 yards per carry for Barkley. That's something that we want to look at and we want to really drill down on. Joe mentioned it in the last segment, how it doesn't have to be a lot of runs. It just has to be one big run. So when we couple our information and we fade all the nonsensical noise, remember, guys, this is the most wagered upon sports event, or one of the top 3, I think it is now, considering how widespread wagering is. So we need to fade that noise and fade that public and just do what we do here on SportsGrid, which is focus on some stats and some good hard wagering. Craig?
Yep. Joe, Travis Kelce, who we talked about, this has been a tough one. 2 games ago, I should say, 2 games ago, we were pretty much sold on the fact that it's playoff time and it's Kelce time. I believe he was Kansas City's most targeted wide receiver in that game, went over the receptions, went over all of his props. Then, in the biggest game of the season, against the team that you thought that he'd have his biggest game, he did nothing. Now, he's been fantastic in the Super Bowl. 350 receiving yards, 2 touchdowns, 37 targets, 31 catches. I don't know which Kelce we're going to get. If this was years past, I would bet very heavily on what we saw against the Houston Texans. But I just don't know if he has that in him anymore. I assume for one game he can pull a Gronk, show up, 4 catches, 2 touchdowns, right? But after what I saw in the last game, I'm not so sure.
Yeah, I don't know about the 2 touchdowns there necessarily, but I do know that, just coming back to what the weaknesses of the Eagles are, it's definitely the middle of the field. So you're really good on the corners, you're really good up front. It's that middle that's a little soft here. And when you're looking at Travis Kelce, let's also not forget, a couple years ago against this Eagles defense that was very good against, getting pressure on the quarterback, did have some better cornerback play back then too. He was 6 for 6 for 81 and a touchdown. I think you're going to see a little bit more of that style game from Travis Kelce today. The Bills did a really good job of making someone else beat you besides Travis Kelce, and that person ended up being Patrick Mahomes. But it's funny, all this talk about the Eagles and how great they are a very talented team, but the team, that has most talent doesn't always win Super Bowls. Just ask the almost perfect Patriots. Just ask the Buffalo Bills back in the day against the New York Giants. I mean, the list goes on and on. The team that is the best doesn't win. The team that plays the best wins, and the Chiefs execute.
Now, I would say as we close it out, Joe, let's take a look at Patrick Mahomes' career stats in the Super Bowl, which are pretty much indicative of them winning the game. The only difference here that I don't think people realize is Mahomes has thrown 5 interceptions in the Super Bowls that he's played. If you take a look over in the props, there is a potential money maker if Mahomes throws a pick in this game. It's not a formidable bet in terms of the money line.
I'm sorry, Craig. Were you hitting? Oh, I'm sorry. Apologies there. Look, Patrick Mahomes, again, to be the man, you got to beat the man. And he is the man. So at this stage in the game, I'm waiting for somebody to come to the top of that mountain. And if you look through who the Eagles have played this year, right? Have they played a lot of great teams? The division they played in, I mean, Dallas was terrible this year. The Giants were bad. They did, play Baltimore. They did beat Baltimore. Okay, that's one of the better AFC teams. I get that. But that was also before Baltimore went in their run. So I'm looking at this Eagles team as being one that I don't think has been truly tested yet. And I think they're going to get a rude awakening this Sunday.
Marsha. Be right back.
best dressed guy, let me tell you, next to me in terms of Radio Row. I want to get your thoughts quickly on the game, Philly and KC. How do you see it playing out?
You know, obviously you got Patrick Mahomes, who just finds a way to win. Then you got on the other side of the table an alien, and Barkley. I mean, he's had an incredible year.
Right.
I think whoever has the balls last is going to win the football game.
Only on SportsGrid.
I have no idea how to categorize what Mavericks GM Nico Harrison pulled off, Joe. All I know is that he shipped off Luka Doncic without telling Luka about it.
If you thought conditioning was a problem for Luka, wait till you get a load of Anthony Davis tripping over air and then missing 40 games because he's like Glass Joe's.
The Early Line. Only on SportsGrid.
Strike intentional loss. All right, welcome back to Fantasy Sports Today here on SportsGrid. Man, this hour went by fast and furious. We're here till 11 o'clock Eastern. Let's get to some quick features for the upcoming Super Bowl as we dive deep. The Super Bowl is going to feature Andy Reid versus Nick Sirianni. Sirianni with his first Super Bowl opportunity to win, lost the previous one. Fifth head coaching rematch in Super Bowl history, and the head coach that won the first meeting also won the second meeting for other times, George. So does that necessarily mean, I know you're on Philly here, so I don't know that you're the right one to start off with, but too late. Does it mean that happens again this time?
I hope not. And I knew about the stat. Did see it. It's one of those stats I like. This is why I have 33 prop bets, okay, in case the Eagles don't win the game here. It's one of those things that just I didn't realize it when I made the bets. I realized, oh yeah, man, Jimmy Johnson, you go to Chuck Noll back in the 70s. I guess it makes sense. If you win the first time, you're generally the better team, so you're going to win the second time as well. Listen, I thought Philadelphia should have won 2 years ago, but I understand their first time to Super Bowl, maybe a little nervous. They won't have those nerves today. I just think they're the better team. I've been saying it all week, guys. Outside of Pat Mahomes, and I'll give you Butker too, name me another position group that's better on the Chiefs than it is on the Eagles.
Yeah, it's hard to argue. I mean, the one defensive back, I think, on Kansas City, McDuffie's better than anybody that Philadelphia has, in my opinion. Matt, let's go to the Super Bowl rematches among the coaches. Andy Reid versus Kyle Shanahan. We know how that went. Boy, poor Marv Levy had to go against the Cowboys over and over again when the Cowboys were the Cowboys. Pittsburgh actually got the best of Dallas at times. Chuck Noll versus Tom Landry, Tom Coughlin versus Bill Belichick. And this is basically, Matt, a lot of these in our wheelhouse here in the 80s and the 90s as well.
Yeah, and when you look at it, the game's different in the Noel Landry and even in the Coughlin Belichick thing. Like, there are elements that are things that we cannot predict are going to happen. But it's about adjustments. And if the book has this game so closely, the Super Bowl, then it's going to come down to an adjustment. When does that adjustment happen? Does it happen early, and is it kept in the pocket, right? Andy Reid, I believe, has an old man kind of presence. I don't know, he gives me a Wilford Brimley kind of comfort, you know what I mean? Whereas maybe Sirianni tries to do the young guy thing, or maybe I'm just talking about a guy who's smack dab in the middle of his life and trying to figure it all out. There's a poise to Andy Reid, I believe. There's a patience. And to Sirianni, I just kind of get that there's a bit of a, come on. So it's going to come down to adjustments, guys, and it's going to come down to maybe one or two adjustments. Where and when they happen, that's the game, correct?
I can't believe that Wilford Brimley was in his 40s when he made Cocoon. It just doesn't seem possible.
Diabetes.
It just doesn't seem possible, and I guess Matt brings up a good point. I mean, he could easily play an Andy Reid, at this stage. George, I think that if you go back in history, you look at Jimmy Johnson versus Marv Levy. I mean, Buffalo was just up against it for 4 years. All those losses that they had in the Super Bowl. If I'm thinking through this correctly, two of them were against Dallas, but I think there was one against San Francisco, maybe one against Washington. Am I right about that? Or was it two
Washington
against
the Giants? Washington
the
Giants and
Giants,
two
right.
against Dallas.
The Giants. Yeah.
Yeah, they should have won the Giant one probably, but is what I mean. They dominated the game.
Yeah,
just unfortunately,
the MVP was on Buffalo, right? In the game they lost in that game, right?
I don't remember who was the MVP.
I don't remember. I
Game?
think it was O.J. Anderson. I thought O.J. Anderson won. I could be
thinking about O.J. as well. He had the big.
Craig,
game.
here what's so interesting about this is that in that rematch, Kyle Shanahan and the 49ers were the favorite, even though Andy Reid beat them already. Tom Coughlin was the underdog in both of those games against the Patriots, if you recall. And it's because they were the Patriots right now. The first time they were really the Patriots. Second time, I wasn't so sure they were the Patriots. So I was not shocked at all that they lost that game. But this is the mental aspect of the game that I don't think people talk about enough. And I keep going back to it. Yeah, the Eagles are talented. Yeah, you look at all the different units and say, well, my God, they're just better, younger, faster, all this stuff. This is about execution. This is about these moments. This is about getting the job done and preparation. And I keep going back to that same adage, which best team doesn't always win. The team that plays the best does. And I think if you look at those coaches, right, they get their teams to play the best at any given moment. The big lamentation this year about the Chiefs was what? That, oh man, all these games are close, right? And the Chiefs keep squeaking all these victories. What's the key word there? Victories. Finding ways to win on special teams, which could be a problem for the Eagles. We already talked about that kicking game. Finding ways to win on defense. Finding ways to win on offense. Patrick Mahomes being a transcendent quarterback. You have the quarterback and the coach. I'm sorry, if you're asking me to put the hands of this game, the ball in the hands of the game right here, of the quarterback and coach, are you picking Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes or Jalen Hurts and Nick Sirianni? I know my answer.
Yeah, no, it's a real easy one. The thing is, I guess, with the regular season of the Chiefs outside of that game against Buffalo, is that a lot of the wounds that Kansas City inflicted were not by them. It was by the other teams making mistakes at the end of the game, and it wasn't by Mahomes winning it. It was the other team losing it. Hour 2 is next. Don't go away.
It's finally here. The big game is just days away, and SportsGrid is live from New Orleans all week long, bringing you the latest news, insights, and analysis from the biggest names in the game. And on game day, we've got you covered all day long, with expert picks, live odds, and everything you need to make the most out of the biggest game of the year. Don't miss a second, and it's all happening only on SportsGrid.
Best dressed guy, let me tell you, next to me in terms of Radio Row. I want to get your thoughts quickly on the game, Philly and KC. How do you see it playing out?
Obviously you got Patrick Mahomes, who just finds a way to win. Then you got on the other side of the table an alien and, Barkley. I mean, he's had an incredible year.
Right.
I think whoever has the balls last is going to win the football game.
Only on SportsGrid.
The two guys that can do it all.
Too much electricity this morning.
This is a good time. We're having a lot of fun.
I had to do a triple take. Ka-ching! Why? Because of parity.
I didn't mean to offend.
Yeah, it's not going to happen.
Load management is a dirty word.
Let him rip.
You know what? Circumstances provide the results.
What? How do you do this once?
Oh, Donnie, you got such a good show there.
A network that is booming.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.